Hi, everyone. Welcome to Guardian Recovery Live. I am your host, Kevin Mike Lazik. Thank you all for tuning in this evening. I am really excited about tonight's guest, Julie Gregory, who is a Plymouth House alumni and also currently serves as Director of Operations at the Plymouth House. I've known Julie for the better part of probably almost 17, 18 years and had the opportunity to watch her journey and all the way from active addiction up until when she found recovery back in February of 2018. So we are going to hop right into it and bring Julie in. Hi, Jules.
Hi, Kevin.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am all right. It looks like my connection is unstable. Hopefully it's not affecting anything, but thank you for joining us this evening. I'm excited to chop it up with you and talk recovery and all the good stuff going on at Plymouth House.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I always like to start with a question. Tell us something about yourself that people may not know. And we've gotten a variety of answers. Kevin Creighton said he likes reptiles, which I would have never known. And so the answers have been all over the board.
Yeah. I think probably something people don't know about me is I really like to make different types of furniture, that type of stuff, like the ladder on the wall behind me here. That's one of my hobbies.
Have you always done that?
Yeah. Even when I knew you, but I had that little table I made that was in my room. I've always liked it. Yeah.
You spent a couple drunk nights in that room, huh?
I did. A few. Just a few.
I never even knew. I was talking to JoJo before this. I'm like, what are some funny Julie stories? And she's like, what do you mean she'd be drinking, coming home drunk?
Yeah.
Like, really?
Yep. And I would tell her, I was working at a bar at the time. I would tell her that, somebody spilt it all over me. I mean, she always knew. She just, I don't know, just let me get away with it.
I never knew. And then she was also talking about some of her driving episodes when you guys were out chasing cars.
Yeah.
Running over the orange barrels on the Bourne Bridge.
Mm-hmm. Yep. We hit those.
Yeah.
There were a couple repo stories that will go down in history.
Yeah, there's always a couple. And her driving really hasn't changed much.
No, it's still the same. Still got to buckle up.
Totally got to buckle up. She thinks she's the best driver in the world. You fear for your life. And she won't let me drive. She says I'm a bad driver.
You just got to be the co-pilot.
Yep. So I want to kind of go back to the beginning a little bit and kind of just talk about a little bit where you grew up, what it was like, and kind of maybe talk about, that first decision to use alcohol or drugs.
Yeah. Well, I grew up on Cape Cod, right over the Sagamore Bridge. It was about a quarter mile from the Sagamore Bridge. So just barely on the Cape. And I grew up with my mom and my dad. I'm the youngest. I had an older brother and an older sister. And to be honest with you, it was just always a part of what was going on. So I don't even remember the exact first time, whether I smoked weed or drank alcohol for the first time. But I know that it was right around 13 when I started playing sports and hanging out, doing sleepovers and that type of stuff. But I do remember the attachment to it right away. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask you to kind of elaborate on that attachment a little bit.
Yeah, I was a very insecure kid. I always looked up to my brother and I looked up to my sister, and I just never really felt comfortable in my own skin. And I do remember that when I started to drink and started to smoked pot, it was like all of that went away. It didn't matter what I had, what I didn't have, how I looked, how I talked, how I dressed. Um, it seemed to be like this thing that just leveled me out.
Almost, it's like you take on a new identity, almost like you become
Yeah.
a different person.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It made me stop thinking so much.
Yeah, and we all know it's our great propensity for thought that gets us where we're at.
Mm-hmm.
That's a Mike O'Malley saying.
Yeah. Father Mike.
A great propensity for thought.
Yeah, I just thought a lot when I was a kid, and I didn't know that was anxiety. That's what they call it in adults, but I didn't really have a reference point for outside of anxiety because I was always like that.
Yeah. What sports did you play? I didn't think I knew that you played any sports.
That's because I wasn't too good at them. but but I tried all sports. I played basketball. I played softball when I was younger, and it was one
So
of
what?
those things I played just to be on the team, just to like be cool. I wasn't terrible, but as soon as I found drugs and alcohol, it was just like that wasn't my focus anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what it kind of so you pick up and you kind of start dibbling and dabbling. Does it have any effect at your home life? Are your parents all over you? What does that look like?
Yeah. So my mom and dad were both school teachers. They both taught high school. So, and my sister, she is 18 months older than me. And so she picked up pretty early and went down a bad path. And I didn't have to do much to stay under the radar at home. She was causing a lot of trouble, and I could just kind of hide out. And, I remember one night when I had basketball practice the next day, and I must have been 14, 15 years old. And my sister had gotten into a bunch of trouble. And I'm just sitting in my room in my parents' house, told myself I wasn't going to do it. And, and I'm smoking weed in there by myself. So it just had a way of making me feel okay when everything wasn't okay at my house.
I don't think I ever knew that both of your parents were teachers. I don't know why. I mean, I
Yeah.
probably heard it somewhere along the line, but I didn't really realize that they both were.
Yeah, my mom taught at Plymouth South, and then my dad taught at Old Colony, and he taught culinary arts. So he ran
Oh,
the
that's right.
restaurant.
That's
Yeah.
Now that rings a bell.
Yep.
And that's where you kind of got your love for cooking from.
Yeah. Yep. So he took a job as a teacher because working in restaurants isn't really conducive to having a family.
Yes.
So when me and my sister were born, he got the job teaching over there.
When did it really stop becoming like problematic? When like start to get jackpots to start,
Yeah.
getting arrested? When did it become problematic?
Yeah. I mean, it was pretty early on for me.
Yeah.
Um,
I think I
I
met
got
you when you were like 17.
Yeah, exactly. And I was in some trouble then. I got in some trouble when I was 15, drinking. We flipped a car over in a soccer field, and I wasn't that bright, so we just stayed in the general area until we got caught. And I got. I mean, the general consensus of me when I was younger is good kid has a problem with drugs and alcohol. Because early on, a lot of the trouble that I got into wasn't malicious, but I was always getting caught.
Yeah.
I was always hanging out with people I shouldn't have been. I crashed a lot of cars.
Yeah.
But my
I think two or three that I've known of, and there's
Yeah,
probably more.
yep, yeah.
And
So I would crash a lot of cars, and my parents always got me out of trouble.
yeah.
You
And
know.
you came to AA pretty young.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause I remember, you've had different, periods of sobriety. And can you kind of talk about and I'm just assuming that kind of you were just
Mhm.
really doing it to get everyone off your back and
Yeah.
to satisfy the courts. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Yeah, I was sent to my first detox because I got into some trouble, and then I went to AA because that was, my parents would come up with all these rules of what you had to do to come back home, because I didn't want to go to aftercare. Um, and I was pretty emotionally unstable. Like I said, when I was a kid, I had really high anxiety, and drugs and alcohol was the thing that made that go away. So I would just become sober. This is before I was ever physically dependent on alcohol. I was very emotionally dependent on drugs and alcohol to get through my day. So I would become sober because I got into trouble and I was just emotionally a wreck. I had a hard time managing. But my parents would tell me that I had to go to AA in order to live there, um and my life just looked like I was sober till I wasn't. There was really no direction behind it. I didn't know what I was doing. And because of my emotions and the connection that I had to drugs and alcohol, I didn't really want to be sober for any extended period of time.
Yeah. I always feel like though you kind of gave it a good honest effort. Like you would show up, you would kind of like you would do some service work. Like it was, I mean,
Yeah.
it wasn't like a total um
Yeah.
I don't even know what the word is I'm looking for, but you kind of tried to assimilate into
Mhm.
it a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I wanted a better life, and you got to remember my sister was she was always a few steps ahead of me, so I knew what was coming. And I didn't want to follow the same path, but I didn't have the ability to take myself off of it.
Yeah.
So I would show up, but when it came down to doing any actual work, like I wanted to be in the room, but I didn't want to work hard.
Yeah. You were there for the social aspect.
Yeah, to some extent.
Yeah. What age were you when you finally got sober?
32.
32.
Yeah.
So take us through kind of that period, from your early 20s to you
Hmm.
finally made the decision to reach out for help and
Yeah.
change your life.
Yeah. So there was a big catalyst. I mean, I told you that my parents raised my bottom for a really long time, so I could drink alcoholically without the consequences for a long time. And then in 2010, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. And it was a short gap. I mean, it was 6 months until she passed away. And I mean, I like to say I was sober throughout that period when she was sick, but I don't think I was completely sober. I just wasn't, I was just holding it all together.
Yeah.
And then she passed away, and I had no other solution. Again, I'm talking about that like emotional thing. I had no solution to the way that I felt, and I had no plan for that. And although my goal my entire life was to never be like my sister, um, I progressed from alcohol and marijuana to harder drugs, and that was really the catalyst for everything. Um,
Do you remember making that switch? Was it like a conscious decision to
I
make that
do.
switch?
I do. I remember sitting in my parents' basement, and I had gotten high, and my mom had passed away. And um, I don't know if you remember, my dad got really sick after my mom passed
Yeah.
away. He started losing his mind, so his attention wasn't really there. And I'm sitting on the couch, and I could feel like my mother was watching me. And I said, I don't want to be a drug addict. I don't. And I came up with a plan. Now here I am, a person who's been to AA and has plenty of resources and plenty of people to call, but I said I'm going to figure it out myself. And I took some medication, and I got really sick, and that's probably the worst car accident that you remember, where I jumped in the car and I was driving to the hospital, and I blacked out and I broke my whole face. And when I came out of that, I said, well, I tried.
Was that the Lexus?
Yeah, that was the Lexus.
That was a nice car.
It was a nice car. I only had it for 2 weeks. And yeah, I crashed it into a telephone pole right by Falmouth District Court, right across the street.
Unbelievable. So take us to the moment that this last time that you finally asked for help. And do you remember what it felt like emotionally? Was something
Yeah.
different about it?
Mm-hmm.
An emotional bottom?
Yeah, and I mean to get to that point, you know, there's 10 years in between. And really, I think the last time that I saw you was right after I broke my face in that car accident. And after that, I left the Cape and I went through this 10-year period that I like to call my bottom, where I didn't want to get high, but I didn't think I had it in me to do what it takes to get sober. So I was in and out of treatment centers and, you know, institutions and in and out of the system for the next 10 years, trying to figure out how to stop being a drug addict. And my life just got worse and worse and worse. I was completely separated from my family, from all of the connections that I had. And I was living in Boston.
I think the
And
last time we saw each other was Castle Island.
yeah, you
When
came
we
to
picked
see
you
me.
up
I was
that.
at a halfway house in Dorchester,
Yeah.
and it was a completely different version of me than you knew, I'm sure.
Yeah. At that point, you had gone pretty far down the scale.
Yeah. Yep. And that wasn't even, I think that was in like 2014. And that was still 4 years away from when I was like actually willing to ask for some help.
Yeah. Because you were homeless and stuff, right? Living on the
Mm-hmm.
streets and
Yeah. I
talk
was
about that
homeless in
experience.
Boston for about 7 years.
Wow.
And, you know, I was under the impression that I was homeless in Boston because, you know, I had developed this story, all of these things I told myself that gave me reasons to use drugs the way that I did.
Yeah.
You know, being that my parents had passed away. By this time, um, my dad passed away 2015. So my mom died, my dad died. You know, all my ties to the Cape, essentially through my family, were gone. My brother moved to South Carolina. My sister, like, I just had all these reasons, and none of them had to do with me, or the fact that like I made this decision to keep myself comfortable at any and all costs.
Totally. And I can relate to that. It's,
Yeah.
it's so much easier to point the finger at everyone else. And,
Mm-hmm.
it's the circumstances, it's everything you've gone through. And
Yeah.
just, it keeps you sick.
Mm-hmm. And it's crazy because everyone that not everyone, but everyone that we got sober with back then, like they're still sober.
A lot of them are, yeah.
Yeah, like I had people to call, and here I was using, you know, all these tragedies and these things that happen as excuses not to get sober. Um, but I would put together these brief periods of sobriety, 6 months, 8 months, and I had put together a year of sobriety, and I woke up one day, felt the same way I felt when I was 13 emotionally. And I knew that the only solution was going to be to use. And I did. And for a long time, I had been equating my drug addiction to my homelessness and to the fact that I didn't have a job or family or anything. But here I was sober for a year. I had an apartment, I had a job, I had some good friends again. And I still felt like that. And I got high and I
Looking back at that, that period of sobriety, did you really do a deep dive into the work? Did you kind of
no,
jump back into the fellowship?
no. I was just desperate to have a roof over my head. And I was desperate to not live the way that I was living. And I I just couldn't live like that anymore. Like, to be honest with you, I would have died if I didn't get sober for that year period. But when it came down to doing any of the deep emotional work in really figuring out who I was and what was standing in the way of being happy, and that wasn't any of the things that had happened to me. That was my way of dealing with them. I mean, going back to, my approach to life was to just pretend my way through it, to lie my way through it, to make it all about me. And those are the things I wasn't willing to recognize. So I got sober, I got a job, I worked as much as I physically could, 60 to 65 hours a week. I saved a bunch of money, and the way I felt never changed.
And what was
And
Ben like?
what was the end like? So I hadn't talked to my brother in, maybe 8 years. I hadn't seen him. He had gotten married. He had 2 kids, and the end was pretty bad. I mean, his son was about to be born, and the last time that I picked up, I overdosed, and I was with somebody, they overdosed, and purely by the grace of God, I was at the hospital with them, and I said, I'm just going to do a little bit, and I overdosed right there in the hospital.
Jeez.
Yeah. And I got Narcan, and they brought me back, and um I said, I'm just going to push through. Right? I've done this before. I'm just going to push through. I'm at work the next day, and I'm like physically sick. And my brother calls me, and his son was born a couple of weeks early, like 3 weeks early. And the thought just went across my mind that if something had happened to me, my brother would have been in Massachusetts instead of with his wife. For the birth of his son, he would have been trying to figure out what to do with me. And just the weight of that was,
That moment that you kind of really, I know for me, my rallying cry was, I'm
mhm,
not hurting anyone else. I'm not affecting anyone
mhm.
else.
Yeah.
Kind of like that moment where that kind of gets ruled out. You really kind of
Mhm.
do realize that, you know, shit, I am really hurting the people that love me the most.
Yeah, and it broke through all those delusions I had that I'm all alone and I'm this and I'm that, and I had to look at this like, yeah, you're all alone because of the way you choose to live your life, not because of your bad luck.
So much
And
easier to blame
yeah,
the bad luck, though, isn't it?
yeah, and I was convinced, I was committed to that story.
Yeah, most
I
of
was
us are.
committed to it. And the facts are true, but the narrative that I created, just simply not true.
And I think that's one of the tricky things about addiction, why
Mm.
it's tough for some people to understand, because it's a disease of the mind, and you can create these narratives that make no sense to an outsider looking in, but to
Mhm.
us, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it checked all the boxes, right?
Yep.
It's a terrible story, but what I'm leaving out the entire way is that I had choices. I had options. Um, and I chose my comfort over everything.
And to a certain extent, you knew better because you knew there was a better way of life.
Absolutely. I knew better.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So you touch base with your brother. Does he give you like an ultimatum? Go to get help?
No.
How did you
No, I
end
I
up in
I
treatment?
mean, at this point, he had been dealing with it for so long. I didn't even tell him any of that. It just hit me right in the heart that, like, I had to make some decisions about my life. It still took me a little bit. I went on a little bit of a run, and I found myself at this place where there wasn't enough drugs to take the pain of me being me away anymore. And I went to detox, and I went back into the treatment system that I didn't want to do I'm a person who went to detox more times than I care to admit. We're talking upwards of 25.
Yeah.
Um,
Respectable.
yeah, yeah. Um, and I went in for the last time, and I had absolutely no faith that this was going to be the time that I stayed sober. But I didn't know what else to do.
Yeah.
And I went there. I went to another program. I had no hopes of going to the Plymouth House from there, but I started making some phone call. You were one of those phone calls.
Yeah, I remember it.
Because I needed some help, and I knew that it couldn't look like it had in the past. And I didn't know what to do, and I didn't think anyone was going to sign on to help me because my track record was lousy, and I really didn't deserve help at that point. And I don't mean that to be negative, but I had burned a lot of bridges.
Yeah. No,
So
so
I
you end
started.
up
Go ahead.
so you end up at the Plymouth House.
Mm-hmm.
Can you kind of talk about that experience and
Yeah.
maybe how it was different from other places that you had been?
Yeah. I mean, the number one thing is I got to the Plymouth House and I sold the same story there that I had been selling at all the other treatment centers. And for the first time in my life, somebody saw through it and they weren't buying it.
Who was that person? Do you remember?
Her name was Sheila. Yeah. Yep. I remember. Yeah, it was Sheila and it was Aaron and the crazy part is it wasn't one person, it was everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone wasn't buying it. So I found myself at this place that like either all of them are wrong or I'm wrong. And it turns out I was wrong. Um
Big shock, right?
it was shocking to me at the time because I was so committed. I was so committed to the story that I told myself about myself.
So how were you able to finally shed that story and create a new
Mm,
one? Wow, that was a great question.
that was a good question.
Yeah, I'm proud of that.
Um so I mean the tool that I used for that was inventory. They started taking me through the steps, and I'm going to be honest, I had no idea. You know, um, I thought that I was fluent in recovery, and I had no idea what these people were talking about. I thought I had some knowledge of the book, and they're talking about a first step, a second step, a third step, and then I start writing this inventory. And I had this experience where I saw some stuff. I'm writing some information about myself that I didn't know to be true, about who I was, about the depths of my dishonesty, the depths of my selfishness, the way I manipulate people to keep myself in a comfortable position. Um, my lack of willingness, my sense of entitlement, all of these things I started to see. And then I heard people say things to me that that I didn't know to be true, but I believed them because these people were like me.
Yeah. What were some of
And
those things they said to you?
yeah, these people were like me, but they didn't move like me anymore.
Do you remember anything they specifically said to you that kind of
Yeah. I do. I remember,
kick it in, will you?
yeah, I was told you're manipulating me right now and you don't even know it. And I didn't know it. Right? I was in a position where I thought I needed some things and I didn't know how to get it. So I was just trying to figure it out. And but she said that to me and I believed her. And I went back to my room and I sat there and I said, God, what is she talking about? Right? Like what show me what she's talking about. And that's a trick question for God because he showed me.
100%.
He showed me. and I did it over and over again. And what I can say is that, like, these people, and this is at the Plymouth house. I was there for 30 days, and then I went to sober living in Portland, Maine. And the people at the Plymouth house and the people that I was surrounded by in Portland, Maine, like, they let me do it until I didn't, and not in a way that, not just until I wanted to stop. It's because I really didn't know it, and I was learning, and I was, the true definition of progress, not perfection.
Yeah.
They didn't fault me for making mistakes. But they weren't going to let me off the hook if I knew what I was doing, and I did it anyway.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And I think that's, you take the alcohol and the drugs out of us. It's the behaviors that, take time, that take effort, that take, step work to really learn to be a different person and really have this kind of innate sense that, even today, I was telling you the other day about, this guy I thought I offended.
Did you call him back?
I totally did.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I feel like I owe you an amends. He's like, what? But, so
Yeah.
that's what recovery gives us, is this ability to, recognize when we're wrong. And, sometimes it does take other people around us to point it out. But, I know now that something I did is not right,
Yeah.
and that's the beauty of recovery.
Yeah. And having the space, having the people around me that will let me own it and grow from it is just something that I probably had in other places in my life, but I didn't recognize it. So I never exercised it.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a product of effort. That's a product of willingness,
Mm-hmm.
and some of those things you probably didn't show in other places, but,
Yeah.
you know, when and that's what I always love seeing the light, and you see this every day.
Mm-hmm.
I do miss it when you see that light bulb go off in someone's head, and you just know that it's starting to make sense and it's clicking and they're working through it and they're taking a good hard look at themselves, and you can
Mm-hmm.
see them changing. It's such a beautiful miracle to be part of.
It is. That's the best part.
And that's
That's the
what
best part.
you know
Mm-hmm.
people always ask, how can you do this work so long? And it's, you know the unfortunate piece is, a lot of times people don't get it, people die. But those beautiful success stories of people that just totally transforming their lives and becoming productive and becoming, family members again, becoming
Mm-hmm.
moms again, that's what makes it all worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree. And that's
What's
what
your,
started to change my life. Yeah.
so what's your recovery look like today?
My recovery day is pretty simple. I still have a pretty dedicated morning routine where I wake up and I get quiet and I say my prayers, and I still write inventory, read it to my sponsor, and have to own my stuff all the time.
Did I ever make the list?
The inventory list?
Yeah.
You were on the fourth step. Yes. Are you kidding? I had to see your face on movies at every detox I was at for 10
Oh,
years.
that hurts.
Yes. Yep.
So you had a resentment against the first day too?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yep. All of it.
I don't know
Just
how
wondering why I couldn't do it.
I give you guys, the people that wake up and like meditate and like, I give you guys so much credit. I wake up and it's sort of like, and then like, I'll pray throughout the day. I pray at night, but when I wake up, it's like chaos. And maybe that's why people pray and meditate in the morning. But
That's exactly why especially, I have to before I go into work. Otherwise, I go into work with all my chaos,
yeah.
and that is just not helpful.
What's your favorite part about being in recovery?
My favorite part is what we were just talking about, being able to see the light come on in people's eyes. I also I do the family meeting
Yep.
at the Plymouth House, and that's something that I really enjoy. There's a lot of things that I will never be able to repair with my family. So to be able to guide other families into recovery feels like the way that I can pay it back.
100%. Living a
Mhm.
mess.
Yep.
Well, we are just about out of time. I want to thank you. I
Thank
love
you.
you.
I love you.
Sister to me,
Mm-hmm.
even though you were a pain in the ass for many years.
That's what sisters are for.
And every time I walk through the doors of the Plymouth House now, I'm so proud that
Mm.
you are director of operations.
Thank you.
And I have an inside girl now.
Thank you. I love seeing you all the time, and I love that it's come full circle like this. You know, you, your wife, your daughter. I left right after your daughter was born, so it's the way that it's come full circle it amazes me.
God is good.
Yep.
All right. Thank you. And thank you
All
all for
right.
tuning in. And we will be back next week, Thursday night at 8:30. And we have Maddie Solomon from Plymouth House Aftercare. Right? That's where he's from, right?
That's it.
Perfect. Have a great night, everyone.